Is this thing live? Are we on? I think we're on. I am doing a little stuff in the background. Stand by while I do things. Hi, everybody. How are you? Stand by while I do things. I set this stream up like super fast. Stand by. You can listen to my dryer in the background do dryer things. This is totally impromptu, absolutely unplanned. I'm like promoting it on all my media. Stand by. We'll pop that there, and we'll go to here and do boot. And do this, and do that. And go here and do that. There we are. Hi, everybody. Hi. This won't take long, maybe. I don't know. I want to show show the process I'm going through to design an Apple III memory card, because I happen to be sitting here doing it, and I figure I would share it, and it's Apple II. It's April 2. So let's do the thing. So let's explain what I'm doing here. So the Apple III needs love, and it is April 2 this year, meaning it's the Apple II month of April, like we have Marcintosh. And this year's Kansas Fest theme is the Apple III. So I figured, well, why don't I just like do a whole bunch of really cool Apple III projects this year and see if I can get some stuff done for Kansas Fest. So the first thing I've done, which isn't really that major, is I've figured out the process to replace all the weird little 256 byte bipolar ROMs that are in the Apple III that do all of this, like, they do address mapping and stuff like that. They're basically used as state machines or soft switches. I've designed a way to replace those with programmable logic chips, PALs, GALs, whatever you want to call it. I have the chips in stock. I'm just waiting for the parts to come in from the little PCB carriers from China to come in so I can solder one up and test it. I have already put together this wacky contraption here and have tested one in my working Apple III, and it works. So I put this tiny little chip on the carrier board. I can put it in the Apple III, and it'll be the same size as the original chip, and also generate less heat. So that's a good thing. The reason I need to do that is I have an Apple III right down here, that has a bad one of those chips. And I had to engineer a solution to replace it anyway, so I was going to do that. The other thing I'm working on, and I have finalized, I'm just working up, trying to get enough interest so I can do a run and have it be affordable, is the Apple 3+2 and 3+2e cards that you can put in your Apple III and make it a 128K Apple IIe effectively, which allows your Apple II to run just about anything you want. I don't know why people want them, but people want them, so I have that done. Lots of thanks out to Peter Puskarich for loaning me his board to clone. I was able to actually I was going to say I was able to clone the GAL chips on that, the logic array chips on that, but somebody else did that already. Apparently, Titan Engineering, or whatever the name of the company, didn't like lock the PALs, so you could just dump them. I don't know. So I've confirmed those work. But the thing I'm doing now is the Apple III is notorious for overheating and bad RAM. The issue with bad RAM is that, or the upside to bad RAM is you can just replace it with 4164 chips and it just works. The bad thing with that is that the chips are becoming more and more scarce. So I wanted to design a replacement RAM board for it. I've been working on this kind of concept for a couple of years now, maybe. But I just rolling around in my head. But this month, in the past week, I decided to actually sit down and do it. So we will start by showing you the weirdness of the Apple II or the Apple III RAM layout, just because it's insane. So we're going to do that. So here is the Apple III RAM layout. It is really, really, really weird. It has this funky way of being able to address RAM so that it can actually output 2 bytes of memory at the same time. It's got this data A bus here and this data B bus here, and it's got these 2 separate banks of RAM. And it can output data from this bank over to there and this bank over to here at the same time, right? So you have to separate these data banks and how they're accessed. Now, all of this stuff, all the colors here show how the RAM is addressed. It uses dynamic RAM, and the way dynamic RAM works is it only has 8 address bits. It doesn't have 16 for the full 64K address space. It only has a 256 byte address space. However, what it does is you strobe in the low half and the high half of the address on 2 different cycles, or 2 different half cycles. So what you strobe in the first 4 bits, which come in on what's called a row address strobe, which is this green one down here, and then you strobe in the high address bits on a column address strobe, which is all of this weirdness right here. And you can see that here, the RAS line is here, and then the CAS line is here. It's got a data out and data in and all of that stuff. And that's all fine and well and dandy, but what makes this weird is that dynamic RAM almost universally will have a separate data out and data in buses. So in theory, and that's how they engineered it here, you can access different sets of these 64K banks from these 2 separate buses at the same time and output a byte on both A and B with the same addressing at the same time. It's insanity. So we have to deal with all of that. I just wanted to go over that about the Apple III and how that worked before I dug into the craziness that is the actual design. If it didn't have this banking stuff, it would be a lot simpler to deal with. Add in the fact that it also has I'm going to step back and say most dynamic RAM, even though it has separate data in and data out ports down here, they're connected together on a single data bus. And whether the data is going in or coming out of that RAM chip depends on whether you're on a read cycle or a write cycle, which is indicated by the RW line here. But in this case, when the data is coming in, it comes in over this bus right there. And when it's going out, it's going to go out over either this bus or that bus, or both, depending on how the RAM is addressed at specific times. It's weird. So here is how I implemented it. I'm going to step back and say the way we implement this with modern RAM is to use static RAM. Static RAM doesn't output a bit at a time. As you can see, I need 8 chips here to output a whole byte, 1 for each bit. Bit 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, right? Well, static RAM isn't implemented that way. It's implemented as a whole byte of data at a time, a whole word of data. So we can immediately, at the minimum, replace this with, my laundry's done. We can immediately replace this with 4 separate chips. However, we can get it down to 2 separate chips. So yeah, that's 128, 128, yada, 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 whatever. Are there things that adding extra RAM to my Apple III would help with? Some higher end programs have the ability to use more RAM, word processing and stuff like that. It's less a factor of adding more RAM to your Apple III, Michael. It's more of replacing the old static RAM board with the old dynamic RAM board with a new static RAM board that is way less susceptible to heat, way less susceptible to static interference, way less susceptible to random falling over and dying because static RAM is more reliable. And also, it doesn't have, how can I explain it? The Apple III 5-volt RAM board has this gigantic resistor on it that connects between 12 volts and ground, and that's it. And that's the only thing that uses 12 volts on the entire board. There's no reason for this gigantic heat sink resistor to be on there. It doesn't need to be on that board. It just generates heat. So we redesigned the board to not have that, and then it generates less heat. The whole thing makes your whole Apple III more reliable. That's the whole point. To give them a new lease on life to these Apple IIIs and not be beholden to this random old hardware that we can't get anymore. Anyway, so let's show the actual schematic here. So that's the schematic, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit so you can see what's going on here. Hi, Jeremy. Yes, hi from VCF East. So the first part of this is this section right here. This section is basically a verbatim copy from the original Apple III schematic. If we look at that, that's this section right down here. That's this stuff, all of this, because all of that is going to be handled the same. What this is handling is how to determine which row address or which low and high address bits get set based on the addressing of the row address strobe. That's what it does. Why the Apple III is set up that way, I don't know. It seems complicated to me, but whatever. So that's what all of this stuff does. So basically what it's doing is it's just figuring for any of these that are active, this line will always be active and that will always be active. And depending on this AX line, whether it's a 0 or 1, it either picks this data line or that data line. And then it feeds those in as data bit 1 and data bit 7. And all of that probably has something to do with the way the memory banking structure is set so that it knows whether or not to actually put out data or where to put out I don't know, whatever. And then here's the data bus that goes into the RAM. So, or not the data bus. This is the low half of the address bus. So we select that. And here's the high half of the address bus. Now, remember, of course, with the RAS strobe here, when this gets strobed low, that means the low half or the low half of the data bus is active on these address lines. And then when the CAS line is strobed, it means those same address lines are carrying the high half of the bus. So basically, we strobe in the low half, strobe in the high half, and pop it over this buffer to this side. And then, of course, this side will keep that address even when these other signals are doing other things to make sure that the RAM chips up here constantly have a RAM data on them. So that's how that works. So that's the addressing side. Basically, we pull in the low half, pull in the high half, present it to the RAM, so then the RAM knows what data to put out. Now, the RAM has this extra line. These are 256, no, 128, I'm sorry. These are 128K RAMs, which means they have an A16 line. And these two RAMs here represent these two data buses here, this one and that one, or these two data banks. So here's one half of the 128, or the other half of the 128, so 6464, and then the other half of the other 128. So we can see those two banks are being presented here. Now, by looking at this and the way these data lines are set up, nothing from this bank on this data line will be asserted at the same time as this bank on this data line, which means we can safely combine these two 64K banks into one 128K bank. Rudy's saying how many layer board? I don't know. I haven't gotten that far yet. I'm just now getting to the point to where I'm doing the layout. I just finished this logic while I was watching Eric's stream. So that's why it's the impromptu stream here. So anyway, so yeah, so this handles the addressing. Now, this is what the CAS logic. It's very similar to the RAS logic. Remember, we strobe in the row, then we strobe in the column. That's RAS, row address strobe, CAS, column address strobe. So we're going to get the column address strobe, and this logic right here is identical to the Apple III logic. That's on the 5-volt board, again, because there's only so many ways you can actually get the data you need to do what you need. If we look right here, that's this logic right here, right? Exactly the same logic. However, I've added some extra logic because I need to combine these data fields again, because I'm combining two 64K banks into a 128K bank. And so that's specifically, normally, this line here would be one bank, and that's another bank, and that's one bank and another bank. And these are the B banks, and these are the A banks, right? But since both of these data banks are on the same chip, I use another AND chip to combine them into a single line called CAS data B, and then the same here, CAS data A, right? Of course, then I use all of that with one more of these and notes, so that whenever there is any CAS strobe at any time, that means we're going to need to have a valid address over here. So no matter what's doing the CAS, any of these banks, it doesn't matter. This gets thrown to here, and that activates that. Which program is this? This is KiCad version 7.0, sir. So we float all the way down here, and we can see we've got the DB and DA. So that knows when a DB address is what's the valid address, it activates this chip here. If a DA address is valid, it activates this chip here. So we know that we're going to be pulling the data from the proper chip. And then what we have up here is all the data buffers. So you have to keep in mind, now that we've got, how can I put it? Now that we have 3 data buses, it's hard to explain. We've got 2 data out buses going to 1 data out bus, and 2 data and 1 data in bus connecting to that same data out bus. We have to converge all 3 of these buses all at once, but do it in a way with switcher chips, which is what these 3 things are, with switcher chips, to make sure that only the proper thing is asserting data on the bus at the same time. Because what happens if you've got, say, this chip is trying to talk, out is trying to write data or send data out of itself, while the computer is trying to push data into the chip, you're going to have bus contention, or a bus arbitration problem, where they're both trying to drive the bus at the same time, and things, best case, it just won't work. Worst case, you might blow a chip up. So bad dooblies. So basically what these buffers are this. This is the data in buffer. This is what tells the or takes the data, or it kind of separates the buses and acts as a gatekeeper, so that when things are talking on the bus, they're not going to be leaking out onto other buses they shouldn't leak out on. So when the data input bus is being driven, this output enable, which is connected to rewrite, meaning write, means we're writing from here. Oops. We're writing from this data bus. Stop doing that, you dumb computer. We're writing from this data bus into the RAM. So when we're writing, it activates this, which will then light up this bus and put data on both of these buses to be absorbed into the RAM. However, remember, because we have the addressing set up so that right here, only the chip which actually is being addressed will actually absorb the data. Then say if we're wanting to talk to a bank on this chip, it's going to be the one that actually will get data written to it, because this one won't, because it's not activated. See, because of these chip select lines. I haven't connected these lines yet. I haven't finished it yet, but when this is active to take data from the computer and down into these ROMs, this will be active to drive these lines, but this one will be inactive so as to ignore all of these lines. And so what that would do is you would have this output enable. You would bring that to read write, but backwards through an inverter, so that this would not be active while this one is active, if that makes sense. And you would do the same thing for that one. Now, when it flips the other way, when there is a read happening, read write will be high instead of low. You can see the W as the line over meaning write, and the R does not have a line meaning read. The line means negative. So when the read is happening, this will be positive, okay, which means that'll be high, which means that this will be disabled. These will be enabled, so that when a read occurs, the data can come out of these, hit the actual data bus, and then go out onto the data bus where necessary. And then this is where we have to do some clocking logic and some other extra output enable logic that I have to figure out yet. Because if data A is live, but B isn't, we only want to activate this. But if B is live, but A isn't, we only want to activate that. If they're both live, we need to activate both. So we've got the output enables here are going to actually tie to the CAS line here, which is, for CAS, DB and DA, so that the data gets clocked over only when those are active. But then I have to combine it with a probably not an AND chip. I have to figure out the logic chip I want, but I need to put another logic chip on here, so we'll only output this when that CAS. It'll only activate this chip A when the CAS is enabled, and B when read is high, because we don't want to activate these only when it's trying to read data, right? We want to activate these when they want to read data, and this data bus is the data bus that needs to be active, right? So that's basically how it works. So I do have a little bit more logic to put into the chip enable for these two buffers, but once that's done, it'll be effectively done. So I hope that made sense. I don't know if it does or not. Oops, this is kind of hanging out over here. Go there. But yeah. Can you make it bigger than 256K? Adam, it is possible to make the Apple III have more than 256K of RAM. That you need to use the On3 card to do that. The On3 card by I don't know who the name of the company is. I had it up here somewhere. I can't find it at the moment, but the On3 card allowed you to do that. The problem with the On3 card, though, is that it also required you to make modifications to the Apple III. You had to one of those bipolar ROMs, you had to replace it so that it would add the extra addressing capability to the Apple III. Even though the Apple III has that addressing capability at its lowest level to address up to 512, the bipolar ROMs that deal with the RAS-CAS address line stuff are only set to do 256. They were set that way from the factory, so you have to reprogram one of those chips. I don't know what that's supposed to be, because my knowledge of the lowest levels of the Apple III are very limited, to be honest. So I wouldn't know off the top of my head how to reprogram that, and the documentation on the Apple III is non-extant. So it'd be, don't want to say it would be impossible for me to do, but it would be difficult. I don't know. The other thing, too, is that you actually have to the On3 has a lot of extra logic on it, and you replace one of the VIA chips. The VIA chip at B4, the first VIA chip, over to the farthest side, you remove that whole VIA chip, and then you replace it with a little ribbon cable that goes to the On3 board that has extra logic on it that emulates a VIA or something that does extra address stuff, because some of the addressing is handled by this VIA chip as well. So there's lots of extra stuff you've got to deal with. So yeah. Other question: will this work on the 12 volt and 5 volt boards? The answer to that would be, I'm going to say no, because the buses are different. However, I would love to buy the On3 card for you because, let's be honest, it's not super great. Sorry, Caps. Stepping back. What was I saying? Yes. 12 volt, 3 volt, whatever. 12 volt, 5 volt. Yes, the 12 volt board's pinout is different. Let me see if I can find it. Wonderful website. Memory board. Here's the 12 volt memory board. Yeah. Let's go to right screen. So here's the 12 volt memory board. And its signaling is weird because it's designed to take, it doesn't take 4164s. It takes 4116s and 4132s. And so its entire layout is different. If these pins, I would, if I want to get into it, I would examine the actual pinouts here of these data buses. And if they're all in the same spots, if all of the data addresses are on the same spots, in theory, it might work. But the thing about the 12 volt board is it's basically a 128K board, not a 256K board, if that makes sense, I think. And the addressing is handled differently at the board level. I think it's another factor of bipolar ROMs being different. I could be wrong. I have to examine all that. So what I'm saying is my research indicates to me that they're not swappable. They're not cross-compatible. But if here's the thing is I've got a 5 volt board and a 12 volt board. I've got both boards for testing. So in theory, I could take my board and throw it at the 12 volt Apple III. If it works, I'll be like, okay, and then it'll work. So yeah, my testing usually consists of plug thing in. If doesn't catch fire, then at least we can proceed. So that's kind of how I do things. So yeah, other things. I see your internet hasn't gotten any better, Mr. Freeze. Yes, it's not my internet. It's the way I stream. If I were to stream directly, not through StreamYard, or if I were to stream through StreamYard using Microsoft Edge, I don't know why, connected directly to my camera and not through OBS, it wouldn't be choppy. It's not choppy on my end. I'm seeing it perfectly fine. I don't know. Just whatever. Is there desire anywhere to recreate the Apple III on a single PCB? No. It's doable. I mean, all you gotta do is get an Apple III and do it like any other board cloning. Take a high-end, very detailed high-end. Sorry, I was reading something on the screen. I got distracted. See, tennis ball down here. See it? See it down there? Tennis ball. Squirrel. You take a high-end accounting, high detailed accounting of all the chips on the board, strip the board, sand both sides, and scan it, and then redraw the board to get an idea of how the board layout works and how all the things connect to each other. Then you can start replacing those chips with surface mount versions of the chips and get the board shrunk way down in size. And then you would have room on the board, in theory, to just slap the RAM right on the board. And they would all be lower. It wouldn't have that mezzanine, this and that and the other. So, yeah, it's doable. I have cloned all the customs on here. So the customs are cloned and replaceable now with PAL logic, or with PAL logic instead of with ROMs. So that's easy. Make me an Apple III card that works in the Apple II. Make you an Apple III card that works in the Apple II. You can plug any of them in the Apple III into the Apple II. They just won't do anything. Hi, Joe. Hi, Justin. A cloned motherboard of the Apple III. Yeah. Somebody wants to see my shipping station. So there's my shipping station. There you go, Retro Techie. Thank you. Yeah, sorry, my nose is itching. I'm in here, New Jersey for VCF East. Hi, everybody in VCF East. Say hi, everybody, for me, Justin. I'm sorry I couldn't make it. I miss you all. I love you all. But yeah. So it is what it is. Well, that's really all I wanted. I wanted to show off that I was working on that. Hopefully, early next week. The parts are supposed to be here the 18th. So Tuesday next week, I'll have the carrier boards in for the bipolar ROM replacements. And since I have dumps of all of them, I have dumps of all of them. I have dumps of all of them in a process to convert the dump into binary, then convert it into equations, then convert that into a JED file that will program. I can get that all done on all of those and get those in the carriers tested. And if they work, then that's great, so that's awesome. So this year will be the year of the Apple III. Hopefully I'll be able to help the community do that. So yeah, that's it. That's all I had. Just a weird, quiet little Friday night. It's 10:30 is usually my time when I stop, 10:30. So hey, Eric is here. Hi, Eric's Edge. Thank you for shooting everybody over to my stream. I appreciate it. Yeah, it's great to have these ROMs. And on top of that, KMac Vintage, on top of that, the carrier board is the size of the chip. It's that big. It's that big. It'll just fit. Even though the pinouts are different between the chips, because the carrier board does all the wiry swappy doos. It does all of that wire swappy do, but on a little board. It just goes, book. It just goes right in the socket. It's great. It's awesome. Of course, the other ones, there are a couple other customs on here, but those are 2130 or 2732 EPROMs. Those are easy to clone. You can get those all the time. So anyway, that's it. I'm done. I'm out of here. Thank you all for stopping by and hanging out with me. And hopefully in the next couple days, I'll have more Apple III April 2 updates for you. And that's it. Good night, everybody. Bye. Is it going to do it in time? I don't know. Go do it. Spin, spin,